Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's Salon webinar. As you all know, the Salon is a space where we explore careers, research topics, and most importantly, the people at the heart of them all. I'm Adam Smith, and joining me this evening is Trevor Salomon.
It's me, Trevor Salomon. It's a real pleasure to be co-hosting tonight's session with Adam as we look at a topic close to both our hearts, patient and public involvement, or PPI, in dementia research.
Involving people affected by dementia, whether as carers, as patients, or as advocates, isn't a nice extra, it's essential. It leads to better research questions, more relevant outcomes, and a stronger sense of purpose and humanity in what we do.
Absolutely. From lived experience comes insights, and PPI ensures that dementia research isn't just about people, it's with them, by them, and for them. Tonight, we're joined by two brilliant speakers who bring both professional and personal depth to this topic. Dr. Antoinette O'Connor is a consultant neurologist at Tallaght University Hospital in Dublin, with deep expertise in young onset and genetic forms of dementia, and a passion for pre-symptomatic biomarkers and early diagnosis. Dr. Rasa Mikelyte is an NIHR Alzheimer's Society Dementia Community Fellow based at the University of Kent, whose research spans care, policy, and lived experience. Rasa's commitment to meaningful PPI is rooted in frontline care work.
How slick are we, eh? Can you tell we've rehearsed for this? As most of you will know by now, I know most of the people here this evening have joined us in the salon before. Each of our guests will each speak for 10 minutes, and then Trevor and I are going to ask a few questions as well, and we're going to give Trevor a chance to talk about his experience. And in a change to our usual format, we'd love to make sure that this conversation is really interactive as well, and that you can also share your own experiences, because we know that we have a lot of people who've done great work in PPI and lived experienced researchers in today's audience. So we hope to get you involved so you can share your thoughts and ask questions as well. I believe Rasa is going to talk first. So Rasa, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Over to you.
That's fingers crossed that internet lasts, and thank you both for having me. So when Adam emailed me and said, would you do a session on PPI, the decent thing would have been to say, I'm not the best person. I definitely don't do the best PPI. I make mistakes. And then I kind of thought, maybe that's a story too, because I'm sure Antoinette will bring absolute stardom of really impactful, wonderful, perhaps even flawless PPI experiences. And then I kind of thought I could tell you about the messy side and what doesn't quite work. And then Adam sent another email and said, can you do it in a TED Talk style? That threw me a little bit, and it's probably the first time I'm talking to anyone where I haven't got slides as my emotional support something. So let's see how this works. I have not perfectly worked out how a TED Talk should work, but apparently there's meant to be a hook of some sort. And I kind of thought that, well, maybe let's talk about fear. So we all are slightly in our own bubbles, right? We hang out with people or even researchers who are a little bit like us. That's what kind of binds people in the workplace a lot and in research. And once in a while, I kind of find people in the wild, I say people, I mean researchers, who are PPI hesitant, so patient and public involvement, and I apologize in advance for as many times as I will use the PPI acronym for ease. But sometimes in the wild, I find people who are PPI hesitant. And what comes to my mind first, as someone who loves PPI, doesn't necessarily do it that well, just loves it, is, well, what are you afraid of? And when I was thinking about what to say in this session, I kind of thought, well, there are things to be afraid of. They're just probably not the things that come to mind first. So this is kind of how I thought of framing the session. But the big disclaimer at the beginning should be that whatever I know, whatever I'll be able to tell you today, that I haven't somehow developed in a vacuum on my own. Any decent experience, advice, or just information to share that I've got has come from my absolutely outstanding PPI collaborators and co-researchers, as well as colleagues that are world-renowned for PPI work, particularly Dr. Amanda Bates. So name-dropping Amanda, brownie points. Right. But there are genuinely some things that I think you should be afraid of, or should at least consider when you do PPI. But my disclaimer will be, actually, maybe they're not the ones. So anyway, many people, perhaps, or at least that's what I heard about from the PPI hesitant. It's like vaccine hesitant, and I'll play with those words for a bit here. But some people are afraid of not doing it right. And of course, the easy answer is, you probably won't, whatever happens. It is unpredictable. It can be complex. There's many moving parts, and doing it right, even if there was a perfect way to do patient and public involvement, you're probably not gonna get there, because life happens, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you should be entirely relaxed and not care about risks or causing harm to people. But just if the feeling is, I want to do it right, I don't know how to, maybe partner up with someone who's a little bit further along in experiencing PPI activities, facilitating them, co-leading them, whatever. See where that gets you. But that's probably not one of the things to be afraid of. With some of the common fears comes kind of lack of control and uncertainty. And I like that for me. I know that for plenty of researchers out there, it could be an idea of a nightmare, because that's how their brains work. That's where they're most comfortable. And yeah, that is part of the picture. Dealing with uncertainty and sitting with it will probably make you a good researcher, even if it's not entirely comfortable. So that's also not quite a reason to be, hesitant about doing PPI. Some people are understandably worried about working with people living with dementia. Some, even though they might research dementia, they're researching, using or focusing on data or focusing on cells. But even for applied health and social care researchers like me, there can be a worry. And to that, I can just say again, you won't always get it right. There'll be loads of occasions, and depending on what kind of questions Adam and Trevor ask later, I may share some of the stories where it hasn't, where I definitely haven't done the right thing. But that will be part of the picture. But in other ways, it's just like working with anyone at all, where some degree of a reasonable adjustment may sometimes be needed. You negotiate a way forward together and work with what you've got, and that can be really nice too. Getting it right sometimes, or knowing that the work, the interaction is meaningful to the patient or public contributors, can be really, really lovely. I think I'm waffling now, so let's speed up through the things you shouldn't be afraid of. This one's not exactly a fear. It's more a reason for hesitancy, but it's thinking that you know better. As in that as a researcher in your field, with your years, decades maybe of knowledge, you know what there is to know about the field, and people with lived experience don't know as much as you. Well, hopefully I'm kind of preaching to the converted today, and we know that's nonsense. But one way to start PPI is to genuinely accept that people with lived experience have privileged knowledge. It doesn't matter how much you know from a research perspective, unless you're living with dementia or you're someone closely affected by dementia. You just won't have that particular perspective. It's a numbers game to a degree too. Doing things together rather than doing solo research will bring more perspectives. This is where diversity of perspective matters too. But of course, if it's just about numbers game or just about diversity, then you can work with other researchers. We sometimes do. Sometimes we even like it. But of course, the point of lived experience perspective is that it is quite different, and it does help you to avoid groupthink, because you can have numbers, but kind of all developing a consensus when you probably shouldn't, or making the same conclusions, that can be dangerous to research. And having people who say, no, you got this wrong, or let's do it differently, you increase those chances by increasing the number of people with different experiences in the room. Yeah, so you don't know better. And that's one reason to do PPI. And I love the moments when I'm reminded that I don't know better. And lastly, people worry about conflict. That happens. And well, some of the skills from therapy that I've had for years have kind of gone from personal life into research life too. So I'm quite comfortable in saying conflict happens, and it's not always a bad thing. It's how you repair that matters. And sometimes it can be a really good vehicle for thinking differently or doing differently. And also, I've never come across a member of PPI groups who's worse than reviewer two. So you're already in luck. It can be difficult if you've got groups of patient and public contributors, and conflict happens between members themselves rather than between PPI perspective and researchers. But equally, you probably already have skills of dealing with conflict or supporting people through disagreement. In this case, it doesn't hugely matter whether it's PPI, whether it's people you line manage, or disagreements in research teams. Generally, many of the same broad strokes apply, and you find a way through together. So anyway, that was my quick list of things you shouldn't be afraid of. Now on to the ones that I thought you should. So power differences are definitely part of the picture. You can genuinely think you're trying to go around power, to be as inclusive, as much on even keel, as equitable as possible. And by the mere fact that many of our names come with a title in front of it, that were attached to a fancy sounding, or sometimes not so fancy sounding, institution, that, or the fact that you hold the purse strings for PPI work, that you're the person paying people, that is likely to result in some degree of yay saying. Right? People might be worried about how they engage. Some people may feel that it's not for them, or that they can't be part of PPI activities, and it will come down to power to some degree. My imperfect solution to this has been to build friendships. That helps to be on even keel. And it may kind of feel, well, is this crossing a boundary? Maybe. But if we can have friendships that work, then we can have friendships with our PPI contributors, or at least that's my take on it. And of course, a friendship may also result in a little bit more of yay saying, as in people are likely to support you or agree with you because they like you. But I don't find that's always the case. I think more often when people are comfortable with you, and when you're sharing the same goal or the same aim, then they're much more likely to say, actually, have you thought about X? Or actually, I don't quite agree, because the relationship is there already. And you kind of know that challenge will not undo all that. The challenge is just the way we work together and think differently or discover new things. What also helps is having co-researchers. I've not been able to do that in all the projects that I've worked on or led, but when I have, having someone to share power with in their role. So it's not a kind of boundaried PPI group that you come to consult, or you bring some information to and then sponge off ideas from. Having a co-researcher to share decisions can really make a difference. They have to be adequately supported, but a lived experience co-researcher will come a really long way. And you have to reflect. Right, Adam hasn't shown up on the screen yet, which means I may still have a moment. I've got a few more things you should maybe be afraid of. Doing harm is something you should be afraid of. Distress can happen. It's not always a bad thing. Feeling is not always a bad thing, but you can do harm if you're not careful. Actually, you can do harm even if you are careful sometimes. upset can happen. There's definitely a matter of, I don't know how to put this, but maybe managing timelines and expectations, because people often get involved because they want to create change, and they want to create change quite quickly. So while I kind of know that often some people will drop off after I explain to them that going from idea stage to a potentially successful grant, you know, we're talking over a year, even then there's a really high chance that something we worked on together will be turned down. That means some degree of drop off in people who get involved, but at least it's honest. So is telling people what kind of impact research has and doesn't have. Because I've had PPI members join expecting that because research is done by reasonably reputable institutions and so on, that people will listen, that policymakers will listen, that practitioners will listen. And we know that's not quite the case, or when it happens, it's more an outlier than a rule. And being upfront about this is important too. With doing harm, though, in a nutshell, I'd say that a lot of my take on PPI is just try it and find out. But I don't mean this in a way where you do or you engage in PPI activities, you get people involved without due regard or without being careful. So kind of take risks in how you do it and how flexible the approach is and how flexible or co-produced the methodology is, but obviously don't take risks with people, with their feelings or just the way you involve them. I'm still not on the screen and I've got 3 more for you. I think you can easily get goal overtake as well. So what I mean by that, unhelpful phrasing, is that if I'm, let's say, leading a project, there will be activities that may not be the best decision for PPI work, for example, but they're a sort of necessary evil to deliver a project on time altogether. And if there is a tension between these two things, if you're juggling different roles, if you're leading a project, it's really easy, even if you try not to let those things overtake and to start prioritizing deliverables in inverted commas over people. One solution for that, in my view, is to have people in your teams, if you can, if it's not a solo project, whose responsibility is specifically for PPI, and perhaps people who are not part of the co-applicant team, so they don't carry the responsibility of delivery. Then they can really loudly say, what you're doing is not okay, or we need to slow down, even if that delays the project. Or we need to do things differently, even if that may produce, other issues somewhere down the line for other parts of research. That kind of role helps. And as I was name dropping my friend and colleague Amanda Bates, that's one of her ideas that have really taken off and really helped. And also have people to provide support. So I mentioned a co-researcher that I worked on one of the projects with, a lived experience co-researcher. And what he proposed from the beginning is that he could join on the project with that level of responsibility with me, is if he had effectively a personal assistant. So at that point, a psychology student who was supporting him through activities, through that decision-making, through planning, coming to meetings, etc. And we've been able to do things like we've gone to conferences together. We're going to the School for Social Care conference at the end of May. And the reason we're able to go together and present together is because Lara, the personal assistant, volunteer, kind of whatever angle we're at here, but Lara's coming with to support the lived experience contributor to be part of a conference, to present with me. If we couldn't do that, if we didn't get a bursary from the conference, then none of that would be happening. One of the other things you need to fear legitimately is making people feel used. I think the way PPI works at universities often makes that a very strong risk and something that happens even when you try to avoid it. So quite often there is no continuity in terms of who's involved. So a project finishes and that's it. and a researcher will have a load of other things to do, a load of things to worry about. In contract research like mine, you know, the major one is getting enough grants to have job security. So sometimes you take an eye of things and you realize after the project has finished, you haven't spoken to your contributor for months. And that's pretty awful, because it kind of means, well, I sponged off you whatever we needed, bye. It's brilliant when some institutions allow dementia-specific PPI groups and support them financially as well as with staff to carry them going. But if that's not the case in your institution, then guess what? Maintaining those relationships is now your side gig. And again, I'm talking from a very privileged position of not having many caring responsibilities or any other kind of responsibility like that outside of the day job in research. So it does become a bit of a side gig. And even then, I don't check in as often as I should outside of activities. And some relationships that I definitely didn't want to drop off have done. Yeah, and it can be hard. Lastly, tokenism. Oh, Adam's on. Adam, I will wrap it up, I swear. Can I still have 2 minutes?
Absolutely. No, please do.
Thank you. So we talk about tokenism in terms of tokenism from researchers to PPI members, and that is absolutely real. But what we also need to be really aware of is it will turn against us as researchers too. So for the researchers in the room, the last couple of things I've done have been particularly PPI related. The last few papers I've written or am writing are PPI related. I know they will get no stars at all in our ref. I know I will not be, when it comes to the department submission, I won't be in it. PPI type work is not valued in the same way. Also, institutional barriers, something. I'm on leave at the moment, and I spent a good chunk of today trying to organize a taxi for one of the PPI contributors to come to an event. And that, from the university perspective, has been like getting blood out of a stone. And that hasn't helped either, because I'm keeping this person waiting, saying, I don't know yet if we can get you a taxi. That's really not good enough, even if it's outside of my control. So that kind of tokenism will happen. And you kind of need to decide what sort of researcher you'd like to be, because, yeah, there's things to lose this way. But I really enjoy PPI work. So whatever the potential losses, whatever the potential tokenism towards researchers that predominantly do PPI, I'd still take that for how much I love it. And yeah, the end message before, oh no, Adam has got his camera back on, is that if, you know, we talk about impact in our work, and I'd love to say that I've been lucky in changing how services are delivered or how, you know, what policy says. I've maybe ever so slightly chipped at the tiny edges, but I can't say my research has had impact, tangible impact on people's lives yet at all. I don't know. But I know that my PPI activities, when done right, have had a lot of impact on people's lives. And for this, it's worth it. Thank you for giving me extra minutes, Adam. And I'm sorry if I've eaten into question time afterwards. Thank you, everyone.
Not at all. Thank you, Rasa. I mean, your passion kind of, where are you gone? Come back. Your passion really comes through through your talk. And if it's any consolation, your point about being impactful that you're making at the end there. We had another session. For anybody watching, go back and watch this session that we had back in December. I'm going to find it because it'll bug me if I don't remember which one it was. So we had a session back in December, which was on the topic of civil engagement, and we had James Rupert Fletcher on that from Bath, and he made this really great point, which is it's about how you thought about that yourself. I'm not making this point very eloquently, that he stopped worrying about whether he changed policy or created a new service, that you have to take the moments and actually enjoy the single small moments that you get, even through the research process, that they are in themselves valuable. So by giving somebody an opportunity to talk about how they experience diagnosis or care or what's bothering them, even just giving them a chance to do that for 10 minutes, or the 1 month of your pilot study, that itself is valuable and impactful, and we should take that, because you're right, as researchers, it's not often that you're lucky enough to change the world, right? To change. So I'm with you there. I don't know if Trevor has any particular reflections on what you had to say. I thought your points about exactly that, about managing expectations, are quite tricky. I think people like Trevor and some of our other community members that have been around and involved in PPI for a long time understand what it's like. But I think for any new people coming in, how do you manage that frustration when you go, well, we've just proven this works, so why isn't everybody just going to do it? Is that a challenge to manage those expectations? You're muted, Rasa. Sorry. It feels very pandemic-y to say that.
Yes, it is. I mean, if I haven't learned by now, what is? I was saying, are you asking Trevor or are you asking me?
Well, I guess both are. You first of all, I guess, Rasa.
I think it's just about making it explicit. I don't think you can manage expectations of others when our own expectations can go all sorts of ways in research. So it's about being honest. If someone expressed an expectation that their involvement will have a tremendous amount of impact, you kind of need to be honest and say that won't necessarily happen, but we really hope that it will. And these are the things we're going to do, ideally together, to get as close to that as possible.
Absolutely.
But there's no easy answer. Oh, by the way, research is futile, because if we truly bone deep believe that, then would we be in the jobs we're in?
I think when I was listening to you, Rasa, and funny enough, I wrote down the same two words, managing expectations. The key thing when you are a layperson, let's put it like that, you're a carer or you're living with dementia, in terms of being involved with research, is to have your expectations set. I thought I would be completely overawed the first time I was involved in any form of research, but actually I wasn't, because I realized very, very quickly how welcome my input was to the research project. And I would say to any researcher, you need to do a much better job of managing those expectations. I think if you don't, there is a danger that people like me will not participate. Because that feeling of being out of your depth is not a great place to be. I mean, I managed it fairly straightforwardly, but there are others who wouldn't, and therefore would not even begin their participation. So yes, my comment was based on managing expectations for people like me.
And I suppose it's providing that, so maybe some workshops early on in the process to say, right, this is what the research process looks like. This is what the outputs will be. And then maybe setting some, setting some ambitions, like this is what we'll aim for in the short, medium and long term from this. I don't know if people do that, but if they don't, it sounds like it will be a good idea.
I think even when you, so can I?
No.
I think even when you try to do that, we get lost in translation. Like I've never intentionally gone out to confuse someone, but I've been indoctrinated into the way academics speak. And I've just been fortunate enough to be in PPI groups where not everyone, but someone will quickly tell me of what is this acronym, or I don't know what you're talking about. Sometimes when you're working specifically with people living with dementia, what's really nice is the level of honesty, where it doesn't necessarily happen in all other groups where people hold back. So that's been a saving grace of sorts, but there's no perfect answer of how to present things up front. One thing that has worked, sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, who do you find is drawn to be involved? You know, I'm wondering whether this is a bit like, you know, you leave reviews on things if you had a great experience or you had a really bad experience. Is that the same for people's motivations to become involved in PPI? Do you find people who've had either really great experiences and really bad ones? And in which case they either really want to improve the system, or they're very knowledgeable and had a great experience and want to ensure others have the same?
I think there's two things. I think one thing is exactly what you're saying. The other thing is confidence. Because people, you know, you can advertise PPI activities as inclusively as you'd like. If you tag the word research onto it, there's a whole host of people that kind of self-exclude by feeling it's not for me. It's not just people with lived experience. One of the projects I'm working on at the moment is recruiting care workers, both as people, as stakeholders in co-production, but also in just straightforward data collection. And a lot of people are people who are happy to do a focus group are much more worried about co-design activities. And we have tried not to use the word co-design, right? And be as inviting as possible. Employ creative methods, other things that level the playing field a little bit. But yeah, people self-exclude on grounds of confidence.
I suppose there's also the...
Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, I think there's also that element of just being in the right place at the right time, isn't there, with motivations? Yeah. I know through, you know, being a parent that the studies my daughter have been involved in is because there's literally a researcher been there at the clinic at the time to say, hey, you, would you do this? And you go, oh, okay, yeah, sure. And I think, you know, I wouldn't have otherwise have got involved in those PPI activities had I not literally had it served up to me right at the point at that time. I wouldn't have gone and look for opportunities. It was because I was asked at the right time. And
yeah,
Adam, can I just pick up on the word confidence, which is what Rasa used a few minutes ago? It's really important to give participants like me, people with lived experience, that confidence. I remember one of the first pieces of research I took part in was about managing incontinence in dementia as a carer. Not the easiest of topics to talk about, but the researcher said to me, you know what, Trevor, you know more than any of us about what it's really like to be dealing with that. And that gave me the confidence to talk about it. It was really that simple.
Yeah. Thank you, Trevor. Listen, let's hear from Antoinette, who I think is interestingly, I love that we had somebody who's worked in qualitative research, and Antoinette, who is a consultant neurologist as well, who's worked in clinics in the NHS, and you're now back in Dublin, aren't you, Antoinette? But so I'm going to share your slides on your behalf, and I'll do that now. Thank you, Antoinette.
Perfect. Thanks, Adam, and thanks. It's really nice to hear so much. Feel almost bad. It's wonderful discussion that's been going on. But a little bit about me. I'm a neurologist in Dublin and previously worked in London. It's mainly in onset genetic forms of dementia, and I've become increasingly aware, having been seeing patients and carers, that actually a lot of those questions you generate are really people in clinic, and they say what's really important to them. And I think it's a real opportunity, it's quite privileged to meet patients and carers, that there's interface between researchers and people with lived experience is where you can get amazing research ideas and research progress, but also ideas and feasibility on how to do research. So I'm really looking forward to working on projects like Down syndrome and working with the PPI guides in Ireland, and kind of at the forefront of developing PPI in Ireland. And they've shown me how actually it's really important to have people with lived experience, like the materials accessible, and actually that it totally informed the recruitment strategy for my projects. I know that I'm more feasible and accessible, and also more likely to have success with your projects if you have people involved. So this what I'm going to talk a little bit in the TED Talk kind of theme is about how to build PPI throughout your research project. Like slightly informed by trying to find out how to build a house, or because I like chimneys, homes, scaffolding. Here we go. Where if you're going to build something, it's really important that you write values. This is a framework that was applied by Mikelyte Network in Ireland. You can Google that. It's PDF. That's readily accessible to everyone. And it's really nice to hear the values that you need to go when you're starting with PPI. But I think maybe because I'm so used to it, my mind never languages. I've always found it hard to translate values. How actually build something like this? Okay, I need a conversation. But how do I lift it up? And then that's why I think you need to kind of drill down into each individual value. So if you look at respect, then the next slide. So what does that actually mean? And in pragmatic recognition of everyone's roles, I think that echoes back what Trevor said at the start, just before I came on there, about the most experience for anyone in that room of dealing with conscience. There really needs to be a recognition of what everyone is bringing, so that there's an understanding from the very beginning of what each of our roles are. What does respect actually look like, and how do we evaluate for hitting our targets and actually delivering on that value? So the next slide. So this is a really nice thing in the framework that looks at how, can't be excellent at everything, and I think that's what Rasa talked about, this is a tendency for perfectionism. And if we can't be excellent at everything, but we could at least idea what excellence looks like. And again, I think it comes back about clarity at the outset. So the very beginning, a co-design statement highlighting what everyone's expectations in the project are, and what they are bringing to it, and what the limitations has, because no one's perfect. And then to revisit this at different junctures, that everyone is, to a certain extent, on the same page, clear on what they're bringing, and clear on what they hope to deliver on. So the next slide. It's also about trust. So, and this takes time, and I think Rasa's embodying this when he says about becoming friends with the people who had lived experience and all contributors to the project, because there needs to be trust, and a relationship needs to be worked on. It's not meeting someone at the start of the project to give us a specific game, getting that information, and then not being the end of it. This needs to be an ongoing process. So if we look at how does that look at our framework, what does this excellent building of trust look like? Next slide. So it's about having a clear set of processes in place and strengthening the relationship, ensuring dialogue, and also addressing conflicts. And then I think something that's really important with PPI is making sure that if somebody suggests something, that there has to be a clear path of implemented and how it will change the process, or if it hasn't happened, why, or maybe a different project or a different impact. There really needs to be evidence of PPI partner opinions, how they've affected or influenced a project. There needs to be accountability, which is something that I really only appreciated in more recent projects, and I think it's really important. And then also negotiate and respect. So there needs to be an agreement of acknowledgement. People are contributing their time and their opinions and their experience, and that should be acknowledged in the way that they would want to be so. Some people prefer that their names be confidential, and I think it's important to talk to people from the very outset about how they would like their contribution to be acknowledged. Next slide. And then flexibility. So it's a little bit about recognition again of time and the commitment, and that it's acted upon. You know, so this is a suggestion. We need to be accountable for what happens. So what does that look like? It's excellent in this kind of idea of framework. Next slide. So again, it's not that co-design, but it's also from the very outset, being very clear on what the time commitment is required. So there will be a meeting 6 monthly, it will be this long, what are the times? You know, I think there's just needs to be transparency and also clarity so that people know what they're getting involved in. So it's commitment that people can be fully informed on what they're undertaking. Next slide. And again, transparency. So again, it's about being open, mutual communication. I think again, big message about this is being very clear from the very beginning what the journey is going to look like. Of course, it will change, it's always evolves, and this will need to be revisited. But at least if there's kind of a framework, there's a reference, people know what's expected of everyone and what the actual output can be and realistic. I think it leads to a more harmonious relationship. So again, the framework, how excellent transparency looks like. Next slide. So it's an agreed individual protocol and schedule, so that the team can regularly discuss the project. And then that also is an interesting thing of, when's the next, when was I due to be, I'm 3 months over to meet people, and the contribution is being as good would be. It's a very set kind of timelines, very beginning, help particularly with need to be flexible. And then I think the idea of not to be anything massive, but in terms of reference, so that everyone knows what they're expected. And then it's also empowerment and power sharing. And that is back Rasa was talking about struggle getting taxes reimbursed. You know, there needs to be a whole system level acknowledgement that co-research or co-design resource is really important. And that needs to come from funders, but also from universities and point of view, you know, being support for promotions and I think this is important for researchers to be involved. So we can go to next slide. So I think we can actually go to the repetitive, and I think conversation where there's going to be some really interesting brought out. And I think you know collaboration is throughout the life cycle. So I think the key kind of take-home messages I would have is it's never too early to involve people start, but also nearly on boards. Be very clear about what the process involves, what people's roles are, what expectations are, what commitment is, and what the outcome can be. And then also thinking, you know, best really look at what people can bring and how they can make massive contributions and be open and to listen. So actually, I'm going to put it here because it'd be really nice conversation again.
There was a little bit of feedback on the sound there, but that was really great. Thank you so much. It was really useful to actually go through it in that kind of systematic way, because I think anybody who's kind of very knows a lot about PPI, probably this webinar is not for you. I mean, you know, we're not here to teach you to suck eggs, but I think so many early career researchers, particularly, who just haven't necessarily had that opportunity to come into contact with people with lived experience. I mean, I've seen a few great talks recently that talk about kind of systematically about exactly step-by-step instructions, which I don't think we do enough, but also then preparing you for the emotional side of that, and what it's, you know, conversations that you might not have expected to have, and how you I mean, is that, I guess you have that as a clinician, you've had that throughout your career as training, but I mean, how do you help early career researchers through that side of it?
So yeah, it's a great question. I think, you know, PPI is a journey, and you know, I think we're all learning at the same time, and that's part of the important thing, is that, you know, I learn from early career researchers as well, and their perspectives. So I think a lot of it is about being open and actually receptive to feedback, and to kind of leveling the hierarchy. As I talked a little bit about, you know, power dynamics, and I think it is really important if you're trying to build a meaningful collaboration and project, to try and level that hierarchy and take everyone's opinion on board. And sort of like, there's never a stupid question. There's, you know, everyone's contribution is worthwhile, and to have that kind of underlying respect is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Antoinette. I'm conscious of keeping an eye on the time. I'd love, do keep, if anybody watching has questions, or if you're watching this on recorded, everybody who's presenting here today is in the community, and you can always post them specific questions afterwards. But Trevor, I'm conscious this is, you know, we can't have you in the room and not ask you to also share your experiences, because you've been on the other side of this, of course. Rasa and Antoinette, well, I can't remember Rasa's exact phrasing of it. She's used. It wasn't used, was it? But you've contributed to the other side of this. What motivated, you know, you to become involved in research and PPI?
I think this probably goes back to when my wife was diagnosed with young onset Alzheimer's at the end of 2013. The diagnosis completely devastated her. A, because it was an awful diagnosis to receive, and B, because 18 months earlier she had been discharged by the local memory clinic as having nothing wrong with her. And she lived in this this phase of devastation for about 3 or 4 months, until she signed up, because she had the cognitive capability to do this, for a drug trial. Now, it's not quite the same as the research we're talking about, but it's certainly clinical research. And the one thing that gave her immediately was hope. And I would say one of the reasons that I've continued to embrace participation in research is that it gives hope to the community of carers and people living with dementia. And I really think it's that simple.
It's funny enough, I remember a long time when we were creating Join Dementia Research, and we were trying to motivate GPs to refer people to read that. I mean, it's research participation rather than public involvement in steering research. But it was the one thing that they bought into, was this idea was, when you have nothing to prescribe, when you don't have a treatment to prescribe, being able to almost prescribe research participation as an option, actually, that was the one thing that they quite liked the idea of. And then when we could even say to people, even if they don't want to be a participant, you can advise researchers. And so many people who were worried about being guinea pigs, I think is still a phrase that gets used in this space, didn't want to be researched upon, but they liked the idea of helping research in some way. So it seemed like a good compromise.
Yeah, I agree. I think in clinical research, you probably do feel rather like a guinea pig, but in most other forms of research, nothing is happening to your body. It's all about how your brain handles it. And I think the differences are quite significant.
And so, you're the chair of the European Workers Working Group for people caring. I know that there's a better form of words to describe that.
Working group. How about that? European Dementia Carers Working Group, Adam.
So yeah, every day, I mean, most days you're talking to other people in similar situations to you, and people who are living with dementia yourselves. In your experience, what do carers and families most want researchers to understand?
I would say that they want researchers to be very grounded and be engaged in real world problems, the problems that we do face as carers, and the problems that our loved ones do face living with the disease. That to us is the most important thing. And I think if you want people to participate, it has to be that grounded. Otherwise, the participation is not going to be forthcoming.
That sounds like sage advice. And what keeps you inspired and hopeful? I mean, I can't imagine what life for you must be like with obviously your circumstances right now. But what keeps you hopeful?
I think it's the sort of person that I am. I'm very grounded, and there is light at the end of the tunnel type of person. That's very much in my DNA. I'm a great optimist. I'm also a realist. You know, I guess there's not going to be a cure anytime soon for dementia. There's no possibility of any help from my wife. But being involved in research is not about me and my wife. It's really about people coming behind us and how we can help them. So that's really what it's all about for me. I throw myself into anything that ultimately will help people living with this wretched disease.
Thank you, Trevor. And I know I take some comfort in how high profile and dementia and Alzheimer's continues to be. I can only imagine how awful it must be if you suffer from some really significant rare disease where it feels like there's nothing going on for it, or it's happening in another part of the world, or it's not as open and clear. I mean, you know, there are things in the in mainstream media and news every day. You were at the ADPD conference. I don't know how it felt, whether that's one of the bigger ones you've been to, but what did that make you feel like going to a conference like that? And you've got, I mean, I don't know how many, there must be a few thousand fundamental scientists mostly and clinicians. Does that give you hope?
Absolutely. I looked around these vast auditorium, and I thought, all these people with brains working on something to do with dementia, it filled me with huge hope. I come back to the word hope. If there are so many people involved in it, ultimately, and we are making progress. I mean, there are drugs coming through now. Ultimately, we're going to crack this, but the word ultimately is as long as a piece of string, isn't it? We just don't know when. No, I came away thinking, my goodness me, I had no idea the extent to which there were so many people involved. And this is but a fraction of those involved, those who were able to be there, obviously. I confess I did not understand most of the sessions I attended, but that wasn't the point.
Neither do ever ADPD either. But then you could go to another conference. You know, we'll all be at Alzheimer Europe in Italy later this year, and that'll be full of people working on all kinds of amazing ways to improve care and understanding and policy and, you know, transport links and the real world, you know, those day-to-day experiences that you mentioned there.
Yep.
So we're rapidly running out of time. I'm gonna last chance for the audience to ask questions if you have one. But otherwise, why don't we ask Antoinette and Rasa if you could give one piece of advice to an early career researcher. So let's pick on Shana. Our new researchers just started their PhD, and they've got a study to do. What's your advice for Shana, the PhD student in the first year? One piece of the most important thing. Rasa, you go first.
I don't assume you mean in general. You're a guy, right?
Oh no, this is nobody specific. I've just made that up. To my creative brain.
Well, I am going to bring it to PPI because my brain has been, turned in that direction for today. And I think PhD researchers in particular, even if they have really wonderful, innovative ideas around PPI involvement, are often held back because the institution doesn't carry a budget, PPI budget attached to a PhD. It happens, in my experience, rare. There's maybe some scholarships that carry it. So shout loud and demand some money for your PPI is perhaps that, but I know it's easy to say and trickier to do. I think it's the responsibility of good supervisors to enable that to happen.
We do rely upon people, the generosity of people's time significantly, don't we, in this area? I don't know. I mean, hopefully whoever's funded your PhD has built time in for that, you would hope. What about you, Antoinette? I mean, you work, obviously, I don't know if you're still working with older people these days.
Yeah.
And students. So what would you say?
I think it comes down to kind of transparency. I think it's a little bit what we talked about earlier about managing expectations, but I just think there needs to be very clear from the start what you're expecting, what the timelines are, what people's roles are. I think it really is important to be very open, but to be transparent, because I think, and I see this clinically as well as in research, it's when people have different expectations, that's when there's conflict, and that's when there's disappointment, and that's when things are less productive. So I think really transparency, openness, and kind of clarity, and an open dialogue, so that people can come to a shared kind of plan and a shared co-design that is real and that it is meaningful.
Thank you. And I think if you've stumbled upon this by accident and you're a fundamental scientist, or you're working in basic research and you think PPI is not for me, why would I do that? I think there's an increasing body of evidence to say that's wrong, where there's a change of mindset now to say even you can involve the public and lay people and people with lived experience, even in the fundamental science side of things, to help share your message, to help spread the word and communicate the research that you're wanting to do, but also to help you with decision making. So when it gets to a certain point and you say, right, which of these avenues could we pursue? Should we go down this direction? Should we go down this one? Having some patient involvement. And I don't know about you, I think everything I've ever done, having a direct line of sight between what I do and the people who will benefit for me is incredibly motivating as well. If you're having a bad day, or you're thinking, if all you've done is look down a microscope or stare at slides or being in the lab pipetting all day, knowing somebody with lived experience and having those people there in the back of your mind really can be motivating. Trevor, I'm going to give it, I'm taking over there. I don't know if you've got any final questions for Rasa and Antoinette, and then we'll come to our final takeaways.
Well, we're very close to the final takeaways, Adam, so shall I go straight into them because the clock's going to beat us?
Absolutely, please do.
Let's end with the top 10 tips for meaningful PPI in dementia research. Let's make this fairly prescriptive. Number 1, start early. Bring the contributors in at the grant writing stage, not just after funding arrives. Number 2, be transparent. Explain what involvement means, what's expected, and what's not. Number 3, I think this has been mentioned already, avoid tokenism. One meeting isn't meaningful involvement. Aim for ongoing dialogue. Number 4, use plain language. Jargon excludes, clarity includes. That's the one I really like, by the way. Number 5, train and support your contributors, just like you'd support a team member. Number 6, be flexible. Make involvement accessible by offering multiple ways to engage. Number 7, listen actively. It's not consultation if you've already made all the decisions. Number 8, give credit. Acknowledge contributors in outputs, presentations, and papers. Number 9, pay people for their time. Recognition isn't enough. Remuneration matters. And finally, number 10, reflect and improve. Ask for feedback on the PPI process and act on it.
Wow, they're awesome. And we should say that all those top 10 tips came from all the brilliant content that you would find on patient and public involvement on the Dementia Researcher website.
Well,
we have numerous blogs, we have previous webinar recordings, we've got several podcasts have talked to this topic as well before. Rasa, I think, has published a piece of guidance on our website for patient and public involvement as well. No, not you.
was ethics, although there was a question PPI and ethics. Maybe I should. Maybe that's your invitation for me next.
That's your new piece. And of course, we're always looking for more contributors as well. So if you've had a good experience, a bad, or something different, a new take on this, or you found an amazing, creative new way to engage people with your research, we'd love to hear about that as well. We're all about sharing, and that's exactly what the community is for. I'm really, really grateful to the brilliant Trevor Salomon for joining us this evening. Again, where if you want to hear more from Trevor, we have a podcast series which is called Minds in Motion. We've had 8 episodes of that already out, 2 more still to come in the next couple of months as well, where Trevor co-hosts that brilliant podcast interviewing DEMCOM fellows, of which Rasa is a DEMCOM fellow. These are Dementia Community Fellows. So I'll also get a chip in. Rasa's talked in far more depth about their work in that podcast, so do go check that out as well. But it leaves me to just thank brilliant Rasa and Antoinette as well for giving up so much of your evening. You've been amazing. Antoinette's also been on the blog podcast before as well, talking about encouraging particularly young people to think about research as a career option, which we need to do more of. And in fact, if you didn't check, there's new master's programs just open from the NIHR today to encourage undergrads to get involved in research. Thank you very much, everybody. I've had a wonderful evening. It's a really important topic, and I'm really grateful to you all for being here.
Thank you. Cheerio.
Thank you.
Rasa?
Shall we just run the clock out? We came first.
I thought we were supposed to stay and have a chat.